Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back. I'm Jenna, your host. Today's going to be an interesting topic. So, if you guys come to the lives, we've been talking about astrology lately and how I'm kind of curious about it, how I'd like to learn more. And while I'm not an avid astrologer yet, maybe one day I will be. So, we're going to talk about what's going on for the collective right now and as a whole, kind of some themes that might be taking place for us over the next 15 or so years. So it's going to be kind of a big transit. So, what does that mean? So, we have lots of planets and stars and things around us at all times, right? We know that that's a thing. So, some people believe in astrology, some people think it's all made up bullshit, woo woo stuff, right? I personally believe in astrology. I think that it's pretty darn accurate. And I've pulled my own chart and I've looked at that for several years and kind of tried to dig into it and see if there's anything that maybe can help me in certain areas of my life. It's weird how when certain things happen, like we've all heard of Mercury in retrograde, things like that, that certain things do tend to happen and we see cycles starting to repeat unless we broke those cycles. So I personally think that it's a very valuable tool and I am learning it. So hopefully one day I'll be able to offer you guys personalized readings for those. I don't as of yet. So fingers crossed that'll be a thing that we offer in the future. So what are we talking about, Jenna? Get back on topic. So, the first thing I want to talk about is that Neptune, the planet of dreams and illusions, that is Pisces, home ruling planet, moved out of Pisces after 14, 15 years and moved into Aries in January 2026. All right, so to break this down and explain it a little bit better, I have a lot of notes that I'm going to share with you guys. So, Neptune in Pisces, roughly from 2011 to 2026, January 26, 2026, is or perhaps the defining spiritual and artistic transit operating in its home sign to heighten empathy, fantasy, and collective consciousness. What happened? Well, we had a collective spiritual awakening during those years, didn't we? Crazy how that works out. All right, so the key themes included profound spiritual awakenings, the dissolution of boundaries, and the merging of or conscious confusion between reality and illusion. So, since it's the planet of dreams and illusions, and Pisces is definitely one of the dreamy signs, right? Very much in fantasy land, very much head in the clouds, right? Swimming off from anything that makes us feel uncomfortable or awkward, right? So we were in that illusionary or dreamy state for about 14, 15 years collectively. It's not just for the Pisces. This was globally. Everybody was under this whole illusionary or dreamy energy dreaming, but not a lot of like tangible movement with things. So things could have felt really off. Things could have felt very confusing for us for a long time, right? So when things confuse us, we tend to do what? We gravitate towards our spiritual or our religious roots, right? And so to kind of fall off from all of these things. The illusion started to be revealing the truth for what it actually is. So we'll get more into that. So it highlights a global shift toward compassion, art, and healing while also fostering escapism, a spiritual awakening and mysticism, a major resurgence in spirituality, the occult, and mystical experiences as humanity seeks connection with the divine. And we definitely saw that. I would say the TikTok app was one that there was a lot more spiritual content on there than anywhere else that I could find. I used to have Facebook, I used to have Instagram, used to have, all these different apps, right? And when I would spend time on TikTok, you would see the spirituality side of things. You would see people actually waking up from the dreamlike state or the illusion, right? And when I went through my own spiritual awakening, I really started to gravitate towards I needed information. I couldn't live this illusion any longer. I had to see the truth for what it was. And so that helped me through my own spiritual awakening and epiphanies, right? Lots of information coming to the surface. So, getting out of this dreamy illusion, it had us look at things differently, right? And some of that was dissolving things that were boundaries. And so, the breaking down of rigid structures, personal, societal, and national, promoting a sense of oneness and universal love, but also causing confusion and seen in like blurred lines, right? So they're playing that song in my head. I feel like we really had a lot of blurred lines and things for a long time, right? Lots of illusion around systems, things that we thought, oh, it's just how things are done. Now we're starting to question those things, right? Because the illusion is starting to fade away. So we're starting to get down to the nitty gritty and like, why are things this way? And questioning things. And that's part of the awakening process. It also awoken compassion and empathy, increased awareness of collective suffering, right? We see that every day in the news. There's collective suffering, driving humanitarian efforts and a desire to um, help the collective as a whole. It also is a part of artistic and creative boom, right? So we see the artists, the musicians, the dreamers surge to the top, right? During that Neptune and Pisces era. And so a lot of the dreamers became really successful. We saw a surge in influencers online, things like that. And so all of these things where it's like we're dreaming bigger than we ever have before, but we're still in that dreamy confusion state. So, a surge in music, film, and fantasy allowed for the expression of intangible, subconscious, and visionary concepts to be had. So, we saw a lot of that, right? AI became really big. We had, Chat GPT was a huge thing and still is a huge thing. Movies, the sci fi, the fantasy stuff, because we can have computer animation and all these software that help us to create these things that only were in our mind, right? They were only dream state once upon a time. And so that was part of this whole decade plus of Pisces in Neptune, or Neptune and Pisces. So there's also elements of escapism and illusion. As this was mentioned before, the dark side includes things like addiction, escapism through technology, right? Maybe we're doom scrolling constantly on our phones, things like that. So it can be really rampant. It can also be a lot of disinformation. So we have to be careful of the sources that we're getting information from, right? There's always propaganda. We know that. There's always going to be something that it's made up. It's bullshit. It's just for likes. It's just for views. And so this is a cautionary tale of you want to be careful who you get your information from, because not everything is as it appears when it is Pisces in Neptune. Okay. So a lot of illusionary stuff, a lot of things that it's fantasy, it's make believe, it's made up. So we have to be careful with that. It also created surrender and healing, a call to release control, accept emotional vulnerability, and to embrace deep inner healing throughout the collective, right? And so we go from maybe not feeling our feelings all the time to Pisces is one of the most emotionally in tune signs. Pisces is my sun sign, so I'm very in tune with all of that. Pisces is also the 12th house, so it's mastery. And that's the topic of today's podcast, is mastering these lessons. And so we're going to get more into that after we go over how this affects us and kind of what we're in for when we switch into Aries that we're already into. So, environmental consciousness, an increased focus on the oceans and natural as certain resources. So, Pisces would be seen as like the depths of the ocean, right? It's limitless depths to emotional awareness, is the best way I can put it. So, if we think of the ocean's never been completely mapped. Why? Well, it's that deep. So, Pisces is that deep of a sign emotionally. Their imagination is one of their superpowers, their empathy, their intellect, right? Since they're the 12th house in the zodiac wheel, that means they're the master, they're the guru. And what that translates to is Pisces has little bits and pieces of each of the other 11 zodiac signs on the wheel. And so they embody everybody. And that's why they're able to master all of the lessons. So when we complete things, we're at Pisces, right? That's the last house. And then our fresh start moves into Aries, which we move into with the spring equinox in April. So we're about to see a lot of things change for the better. Things that become from the dream or illusionary state moving into the physical, into the tangible. What year did we just enter, kids? The fire horse. We're about to really escalate some things. I wore red for just such an occasion because fire, right? Aries is a sign that's all about action and passion and force, taken by force sometimes. It's also the god of war, right? And so in this transit, we may see some upheaval across the globe, right? Not to fearmonger or anything, but history does repeat itself. And this aspect actually happened during certain times of like the Revolutionary War, the, Civil War in America, things like that. So these aspects definitely do tend to mean something to more than just a single person. It's for the collective. So, this transit, Neptune in Pisces, encourages navigating life with intuition rather than logic, right? The dreamy state, often leading to a need to discern between the inspiration and true inspiration and illusion, right? We need to see the truth for what it is. So, we can't always be in that dreamy state. It's great to dream, it's great to be inspired by things, it's great to have an imagination, right? But sometimes we have to come back to reality. And I will tell you, as a Pisces, sometimes that's a very sad thing because the dream state is my happy place. My dreams are usually nuts and I love it. I love when I have a really vivid dream. I love when there's that spark of creativity and there's this passion about fantasy land. It's fun for me. As a kid, I remember daydreaming in school all the time. I'd look out the window and I'd just let my mind wander. Little did I know I was channeling back then. I had no idea that was what I was doing when I was just literally sitting there staring off into space. But that is what helped me open up my gift, is being able to just kind of be in fantasy land. So there's perks to it. There's also a downside, right? We have to have factual information to continue to move forward, to make positive changes, to take action instead of just dream about things. So, what is it that we need to know about what's coming for us with Aries and Neptune? All right, so Neptune entered Aries on January 26th, 2026, marking a 14-year transit until 2039. So it's going to be there 14 years and it ends 2039. Then it'll move into the sign of Taurus. All right, so it marks shifts collectively energy from Pisces, the dreamy, boundary dissolving haze, into Aries, bold, action oriented, and independent focus. Those are big differences, right? We go from dreaming about it to making it a reality. So I feel like the next 14 years are going to be pretty pivotal. Spirit's giving me the word catastrophic. In some cases, it'll be catastrophic changes, but it will actually help us to get things back on track. So let's see, where did I leave off? Okay, it represents a spiritual warrior phase, right? Aries is the god of war, demanding that ideals be grounded in personal action with potential for major innovation and upheaval. So there's going change, but we know that the change is necessary to get us to the next leg of our awakening for the collective to actually make it, right? So things have to change, and we're starting to see some of that all over the globe, right? We're starting to see empires fall or have major upheaval going on, right? Structures and power struggles, we're starting to see some of that be a problem. And so the people are starting to take back power and control. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's always how it goes. But eventually we start to see the peace coming back, right? Because we've battled these things out, we've changed the things that need to change, and then we can finally go, we're done. We can finally enjoy some of what we've worked so hard for. So, some key aspects of Neptune in Aries from 2026 to 2039, there we go, include actionable ideas. The focus moves from passive contemplation to active pursuits of dreams. Belief systems becoming more personal and urgent, right? There's this urge. It's like something's got to change, something has to happen, that need to move, okay? And that's what we're going to really start a lot more of. We're also going to start to see spirituality and independence, right? So, we've done episodes about spirituality and how it differs from religion. So, if you haven't seen that, go check that one out. But the short end of it is that spirituality is where we aren't necessarily confined to a specific religion. It's faith based, but it's spiritual, meaning that we are connected to more nature and the human collective than we are closed off into specific religious beliefs. So they're very separate things, very different. All right, so spirituality and independence. This period fosters spiritual independence, prioritizing personal conviction over collective conformity, right? We're not going to be allowed to be just the square peg in a box anymore. We're going to kind of come out of our comfort zones. We might break societal norms. We might not conform to what we've always believed in. We might kind of branch out or break free from all of these things that have held us back. Initiation and individualization. Neptune in Aries encourages exploring new ways of being and initiating new spiritual endeavors, rather than just returning to the collective oceanic oneness of Pisces. So, what does that translate to? We're going to start to see initiation in some of these things, new beginnings, right? Creating new pathways. And while we're still using some of the energy from the Pisces energy of the dreaminess, Aries allows us to actually complete things and take action on them. So, we're about to start seeing some new ways of doing things. What are some historical parallels? The last time that Neptune was in Aries, roughly in 1861 to 1875, coincided with significant social upheavals, including the American Civil War, pointing towards a period of intense redefinition of national and cultural identities. Okay, so whether you believe in astrology or not, history shows us that this was an active aspect in our world, quite literally, during those times. So, yes, I do think we're going to start to see power struggles. Yes, I do think that there is the possibility of war and conflict. Maybe it's not on the scale that it used to be. I think some of it is more spiritual in nature, right? Spiritual warfare. And if you're unsure or unfamiliar with spiritual warfare, look it up, do some research on that. We're all in a battle, right? The time that we in a spiritual warfare, this battle for our soul. So you're going to have to get really clear on your belief systems during this time. You're going to have to decide, what do you stand for? What do you believe in? Because it will come into question in some regard. We're also going to see some changes in power and leadership across the globe. So again, those are changes that affect not a small population, but us as a whole, the collective consciousness. And that is why we're discussing this, because the whole purpose of the podcast is to share knowledge to help empower you. So, what are the individual impacts for this? So, for individuals, it signals a shift towards taking control, building confidence, and transforming dreams into reality, particularly after the sometimes confusing, boundary dissolving, or overwhelming Piscean influence, right? I will tell you that as a Pisces, sometimes there's people in my world that they can't handle me, right? They're like, ooh, she's a little much. And I get that. I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. This Pisces energy is something that was needed to wake things up, right? It was needed for the collective to complete difficult cycles, to understand certain things. And as we approach the, or we're already in it, but the Aries and Neptune, how we start to actually have to put all of these ideas into action. And so we come out of this dreamlike state into this I'm ready to take action sort of mentality. So this shift marks the birth of a new dream where the imaginative and the spiritual, often nebulous in nature, of Neptune is combined with the pioneering, fiery, and direct energy of Aries. So we go from sleeping to wide awake and ready to take action. So this aspect is also going to help us to identify and use self-assertion, a shift towards prioritizing personal conviction, passion, and fighting for individual happiness. I love that for the collective, right? So Pisces is definitely a sign that I would say is a people pleaser, and I'm a reformed people pleaser, right? We have to have boundaries in order to really be healthy in life. We can't bend over backwards and be depleted constantly. We've got to start taking good care of us. And so Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, it's about the self. And you might be going through a period of self discovery. You might be setting boundaries where maybe you never thought you could before. You're prioritizing your needs, your wants. So while that may come off as selfish to some, it starts to become a form of self preservation, right? And to ensure that we survive, we also have to take care of who? Number one. And who's going to do the best job of that? You are. You're going to take good care of you. So the ideological transformation is similar to 1861 to 1875 transit. This period marks intense battles for independence, radical changes in societal beliefs, and new artistic or spiritual movements. Now, I will tell you in the late 1800s, there was a huge increase in the spiritualist movement. And if you look back at history, certain places like Florida was a huge place, as well as I want to say Maine, certain parts of Maine, that there were these spiritual camps, right? So these people conducted things like seances, mediumship, things like that. And people from all over the world came to these places in hopes of connecting with people on the other side. So we're taking that element and then we're plugging it into the tangible, right? So the spiritual meets the tangible is kind of what this energy is looking like. The dreams become the reality. So, what is it that you're dreaming about? Because this next 14-year cycle is going to help make it possible. So in this next leg, where we bring Neptune into Aries, the dreamer, Neptune, becomes the doer in Aries, right? So the dream becomes reality, fostering creative innovation that, while potentially groundbreaking, might require caution to avoid burnout or reckless, hasty decisions. So that's the caution with this energy, right? What happens with a little spark? Well, if you're not careful, you could burn a forest down, right? We've seen forest fires. We know how a small little turn into a raging inferno. So that's the caution with that energy, right? While it might sound like, oh man, I'm going to make my dreams a reality. This is going to be fucking badass. I'm so excited. Yes, but with caution. So if we throw caution to the wind and we flick a lit cigarette into a high burn area, it's probably going to burn some things to the ground, right? And while that might also happen, we need to maybe use some caution and try and figure out a way to ignite these things without everything burning to the ground. So there needs to be some caution, but I feel like unfortunately there are going to be some things that really do kind of take off, let's say. So this transit is encouraging turning dreams into the tangible, pioneering realities while navigating the potential for impulsivity and self-deception in pursuit of new ideals. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I was experiencing as a Pisces sun during the last 14 years during this transit from Pisces and Neptune, Neptune and Pisces, however the heck you're supposed to say that. All right, so this all started in 2011 and it lasted until January 26th, 2026. So that was the 14-year cycle. And then we moved into Aries in Neptune, and that's going to January 26th, 2026 until 2038. So another 14-year cycle. So in 2021, I was attending cosmetology school. I had 2 years prior gone through a really horrific divorce, lost custody of my kids, had a complete and total nervous breakdown, became kind of a raging alcoholic for a while, trying to cope with things. I was homeless, I was jobless, I had been sexually harassed at work and ended up leaving the job that I had for a few years. Life was kind of a fucking rolling shit show for me, right? And so there was this illusion that things would get better in my world. And I'll tell you that for a really long time, they weren't better. They really weren't. They were kind of a nightmare. And so I just did what I could do. I, couch hopped. I was with friends for a while trying to get myself stable. And when I was in beauty school, I met a friend at the time who ended up becoming a roommate of mine. I lived with them for about 4.5 years, for a very long time. And that created a lot of stability for me, which was a really beneficial thing because up until that point, my life had been kind of a fucking nightmare, if I'm being quite honest. So in 2011, I had graduated cosmetology school. I had got my cosmetology license. It took 3 attempts to get it at state boards. I had numerous issues. My mannequin stand broke. I had a panic attack one of the times. Couldn't seem to figure out what I was doing wrong in one of the razor haircuts that we had to do. Finally, on the third try, I passed, and I was so excited. I thought, here's my ticket into a better life. I'm going to be able to have a steady, solid income for me and my kids. I'm going to finally, hopefully, be able to get a place of my own and get my shit straight. Okay. And so that was 2011, 2012. That's when those changes happened for me. So in 2012, I finally passed state boards and I got my cosmetology license and I applied for my first stylist job. And lucky me, I don't know how I always have the luck to do this, but my interview was with our regional manager of the hair cutting chain that I worked for. I won't drop names because I don't work for them anymore. They don't get free advertising from me. But anyway, so I end up doing my face-to-face interview with the regional manager. She's who happened to be conducting interviews that day. No harm, no foul. I was fine with it. It was great. And we sat and shot the shit after the interview for probably well over 2 hours. And she said, well, do you have like a mannequin with you or anything that you can do your practical? Because they had to know you could cut hair to work in a salon. And I said, I don't have a mannequin. I'd be happy to cut, a human if you want me to do that instead. And she said, well, I'm in need of a haircut. So if you're willing to, I'd love for you to just cut my hair. So, this is potentially my new boss, and not just like the store manager. She's the regional manager, which meant she oversaw countless stores in our area, plus stores out of state. And so I was like, yeah, sure, no problem, did her hair and everything turned out great. And she said, so when can you start feasibly? And I said, I could start tomorrow if you need me to start tomorrow, like I'm ready. And so I got the job and I started. I loved it. At first, I loved it. So that was the first big thing. I went from dreaming about having a career in hair and doing it to actually doing it, right? So that was the first big milestone. So I would say I worked in a salon probably from 2011, 2012 until about 2015. And there were lots of reasons why I ended up leaving doing hair, but one of it was spiritually, I was really feeling called to leave the industry. I didn't know why. I didn't know what in the world I was being called to do. I didn't know how I was going to make it financially. I was in a new relationship with my current boyfriend, and it was a blended family. He had 4 kids, I had 4 kids, right? We were both working all the time. I was commuting. And then one of my boys came to live with us full time because he was having difficulties in his life. And so his dad called me randomly one day and said, I think it would be best if he comes and lives with you for a while because what he's doing here is going to get him expelled from school. And like, we don't know what else to do. So he wants to come live with you. Is that something you're prepared to do? And I was like, yeah, I've got to rearrange some things in my schedule, but yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. So my middle son came to live with me during that time. I was working nights so that I could homeschool him because he got in trouble at school, couldn't return. So we are doing online schooling for him. So during the day, I was doing that with him. And then at night, I was commuting back to work. And then I was coming back and rinse, repeat. And I just got to the point where I'm like, I can't do both of these well anymore. I can do one really well, but I'm spread too thin. I can't do both really well. And my son really is going to need me right now. And which is more important? So I had that difficult conversation with my boyfriend and I said, do you think if I quit my job to be home full time, you can manage to pay the bills without a second income? And he said, I guess we'll figure it out, like it's whatever, we're going to make it work. So I left my job. Prior to me leaving that job, I was having some health issues. So I ended up having to have surgery out of the blue. I had tumors in my parathyroid that had to be removed. This was the second version, the second go round of the exact same issue. So I was on medication that was creating problems in my body. So I had to wean off of that and come off of medication I'd been on for years. So that was a scary thing because I didn't know what was going to happen with that. And then um, I tore my rotator cuff in my shoulder. So I was having problems cutting hair to begin with because the tear was in my shoulder and I'm right handed in my right shoulder. So that was making life really challenging to do hair. And then I was diagnosed shortly thereafter with a chronic illness. I have fibromyalgia, so chronic pain in the body, inflammation, and there's a slew of like 200 plus symptoms, and it's a pain in the ass, and there's no cure for it. So that was a big shit show to swallow, right? And so all of this really changed the course and trajectory of my future. I didn't really know what spirit was calling me to do. Why was all of this happening all at once? What was the real reason? And so I had to make adjustments in my life. So we got my son back on track. He was in online schooling and he graduated, and everything was good with that. But we had some other hiccups within the family that we were dealing with. And then when I left hair in 2015, that's when a lot of these changes really started to happen for me. So from 2015 to 2020, I went through a lot of these life changes, and they were major changes for me. I left my career that I had worked so hard to achieve, and I really just didn't know what to do with myself during those years. So my main focus was on raising my kids and, taking care of a household and everything, helping take care of my stepkids and all of that stuff, right? And so life was just busy. So that was kind of my career at that point. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was taking care of the kids, taking care of the house, blah, 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 yada, yada. That's what happened. So 2020, right? 2019 is really officially like when my awakening started. So in 2019, well, probably even before that, but we'll just say 2019. I started to really see things differently in the world. I started to maybe look outside the box of things that I had just always believed it was just the way it was supposed to be, right? And I think a lot of us were kind of under the same illusion for a long time of just, it's how the world works. It is what it is, right? There's nothing we can do to change it. And slowly but surely, I started to really see the world differently. And as a result of seeing things differently with how the world works, let's say religion for one, I decided that organized religion as we know it wasn't for me. Even though I grew up in a Christian household, I went to church, I studied the Bible, I really regularly went to church way back when, and um, I would say like the church that I grew up going to was just your average run of the mill Methodist church growing up. And that was what I went to as a kid through probably my teenage years. And then through lots of tragic losses of family members, my grandparents, both my grandmothers passed 6 months apart from each other. I kind of started to fade away from the church because I was angry at God and I didn't understand why God would take away good people and allow evil to run rampant in the world. I still question that from time to time. And so I started to question my own spirituality a long time ago. Before I was ever even 20 years old, I really questioned those things, probably in my early teens. And I was a rebel, self-admittedly. I was a bad girl for a while. I was ornery. I didn't like rules. I really liked to challenge the status quo. Got in a lot of arguments with my mom over the years, and just really wanted to do things my way. I had a plan. I didn't like the rules that everybody was trying to impose on me for things, and I wanted to do things my way even if it cost me, and cost me time, cost me energy, grief, headaches, all those things. So we're going to say that this episode's going to be called Mastery of Brick Wall Learning. Why? Well, because I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And I think a lot of us did. A lot of us are really stubborn and don't like rules and regulations and things like that. So it's hard for me to put my square peg in that round box. It doesn't fucking fit. Okay. And so, me as an individual, that's who I am at my core. I'm a rebel. I'm somebody who fights for the underdog, and I always have, and I always will. And so I'm so excited to see what this next leg of the journey of life looks like in Aries and Neptune, because we're about to put some action behind all these ideas. All right. So 2019 to 2020 was a huge turning point for me. It was when I went through my first major spiritual awakening and was conscious of it. Let's put it that way, because I've had a few, but this one was really about, um, seeing it for what it was. I would say that my first spiritual awakening was probably in about 2007, 2008. I was hospitalized. I had a nervous breakdown. I was diagnosed with clinical depression and postpartum depression. And I was going through a really traumatic divorce from my ex husband and just a lot of shit going on in my world. And I remember at the point that I was in the hospital and crying to God and saying, if you're really real, then I'm going to need you to show up for me in a really big way. Don't let all of the shit that I'm going through be for nothing. Don't let it be for nothing. Because otherwise, what in the world are we doing here, right? Like, what is the point of all of this stuff? And I remember the reply that I got back was, it won't be for nothing. There's going to be a reason for it, but you're not going to see it for a really long time. So I made a promise in that moment that if God would lead me, that I would follow. I wouldn't question it, although I have. I wouldn't argue with it. I would just do what he wanted me to do. If he promised me that it would be for a reason and that one day I would understand what all of this chaos and all of this bullshit that I had to endure was for, and that it was for the purpose of the greater good, right? That hopefully I would help somebody with all of the bullshit that I had survived. Okay, so I didn't know what the purpose was going to be back then. I knew I had a really big uphill battle that I had to fight going forward. I had to fight to gain any sort of visitation or custody of my kids in my divorce. I had to figure out a place to fucking live. I had to figure out a job. I was a stay at home mom the whole time I was married to my ex husband. And so I hadn't worked in a long time, and trying to get back into the workforce was going to be a challenge. So I knew I needed some sort of education, right? I just had regular shitty little jobs up until that point, nothing super big, no real path, right, for my life. And so cosmetology school was supposed to be something that helped me at least have some income. And so while it was enjoyable at the time, I don't really miss it, if I'm being quite honest. Like, I don't miss being covered in other people's hair, and no offense to the rest of the human population, but sometimes people are really gross. And so I don't miss that aspect of it. I do miss sometimes having cash in my pocket all the time because that was a nice bonus. But short of that, it was a part of my timeline, but it's not my forever timeline. And so while I still have an active cosmetology license, I no longer do hair unless it's for friends and family. So that was just a chapter in my life. Okay, so fast forward, we left hair in about 2015, and then 2019 is when the major life changes started. That's when I was chronically ill and diagnosed with fibromyalgia. That's when I found out about all of these other things, right? And so then internally, I'm going through a lot of things. There was upheaval in my life. I lost contact with my dad. He cut me off after we had been super close for years. So in this timeline, I lost my mom. She physically passed away. My sister and I lost our connection because of childhood trauma and abuse that we had both gone through. Um, there were a lot of major changes that happened in a short period of time, in just a couple of years. And so my entire world literally was dismantled, and I had to rebuild more than once over the course of the last 15 years. And so if you would have told me in 2008 that I'd be doing this today, I'd have laughed in your face. I'd have been like, there's not a chance in hell that this girl is going to do that. There's no way. I'm not that person. And I wasn't. I had to go through all this change to become who I am today. And I feel like a lot of us can resonate with that, right? We're different. In 15 years, people really do change. They really, really do. Maybe you don't look as different on the outside, but internally, I promise you, there's a lot of changes. So in 2020, we know we had COVID, right? And everybody's world changed. I don't think there's a person on the planet that's like, oh yeah, nothing changed for me during COVID. Not one thing. That is bold-faced lie. I know for a fact COVID changed everybody. It changed how we view the world. It changed how we view each other. It changed how we viewed, like, scientific evidence and all of these things, right? It changed our view on a lot. And so for me, 2020 was a huge part of my spiritual awakening. And one of those things was that I lost my mom. And so, if you've read my book, which we're going to talk a little bit about these today, I have two books. So, this one is called Stepping Stones to Destiny. It's probably backwards on your screen. Apologies. So, this is my autobiography, and I wrote it because of my spiritual awakening. So, in 2020, um, I, I, it's crazy because it's like it was yesterday. I had had a crazy dream, right? Dreamy Pisces energy. I had had a crazy dream about my mom. I want to say probably in about May, April or May. And in that dream, I saw um, all of this commotion going on. I saw my mom pass. I saw her die. And I saw that I heard it through the grapevine that I had to find out from like the police in the dream of what happened. So fast forward a few months. I get a random message from my niece who doesn't talk to me a whole lot. And she said, "We can't reach grandma. Have you heard from her?" And I was at a doctor's appointment for one of my kids, and I said, not in like a week or so. I'm supposed to go cut her hair this next weekend. Let me try and get a hold of her. Don't panic. I'll call you right back. So I start blowing her phone up, right? Facebooking her, texting her, emailing her, whatever, just trying to get a hold of her. No answer. I'm like, huh, that's kind of weird. So I thought, well, maybe she's out in the garden or something. They had a community garden at her building. And I thought maybe she's just out. She'll set her phone inside. No big deal. So about an hour goes by, and I thought, oh, I'm a little anxious. I think I want to try calling her building. So I just had this stinking suspicion that I had to keep digging until I got an answer, and I'm glad that I did. So I call her building and I talked to somebody at the office and I explained the situation and I said, um, we've had a person that lives in the building contact other family and say that they wanted to offer condolences for my mom's passing. And I said, we need someone to go do a welfare check because we're concerned that she's not okay. She's already had strokes. She lives on her own. I'm an hour and a half drive and I can't make it there just to be able to go check on her. Can somebody please go verify she's okay and let me know? So they said, yeah, sure, we'll go check on her and we'll give you a call back. About another 45 minutes goes by. I call my boyfriend. I tell him, I think something's happened to my mom. I'm at the doctor. I'm wrapping up. I'm going to head home. And he said, if you still haven't heard from him by the time you get home, call the police and have them go check on her. And I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Mind you, this is in the middle of lockdown. I couldn't have gotten to her building if I wanted to. They weren't allowing anybody who wasn't a resident in there. So I had no other choice but to call the police to figure things out. So I make it all the way home. I call the local police department, explain the situation, tell them, we've had people in the building say that my mom has passed away. Called my niece and told her they were offering condolences, and we don't know what's going on. So can someone please go see if she's alive or not and let me know? So probably another 20, 30 minutes goes by and the phone rings. And I just had a sinking feeling. Now I'm getting to the point where I can start to talk about these things without breaking down every single time. But in the beginning, this was a huge deal for me. And so I feel like I'm healing from this to some degree. I'm adjusting to it. And 5.5, 6 years later, it's still difficult to talk about. So the woman on the other end of the phone's name was Marcy, which is my boyfriend's mom's name, who passed away. And I never met her or his dad before they passed away. That's a whole other subject, but it matters in this story. So she tells me that they made contact to my mom's apartment and that they found her in the bathtub and that it appeared that she had slipped or fallen in there and that the water was running but she wasn't submerged, so she didn't drown, but that she had clearly been there for a little while, a few days at least, and that she was deceased. And so before we got off the phone, I told her, I said, I know this sounds really crazy, but um I had a dream that this was going to happen exactly how it's played out. And I said, I don't really know what to make of that, but I'm grateful to know that, what happened is at least we know. So now we can start to figure things out going forward. And she's a very kind woman. I think I sent her and the medical examiner's office a thank you letter after the fact. But this is what started me on my path of being a medium. I always had prophetic dreams. A prophetic dream is basically something that's predictive in nature, that you dream it and then it happens. My whole life, I've had dreams that came true. And so as a teenager, I started to keep a dream log, a journal of all of these incidents because I was trying to figure out how soon from the time that I dreamed about it did it happen. I wanted a timeline. I wanted to know. The timeline has gotten shorter and shorter. I will tell you, the stronger that this gift gets, the closer that these things are to happening. And I've created a lot of timelines just in my journals of how soon, when did it happen, how did it happen, were the details accurate, all of those things. So the reason that I bring up the book is because the book was a pivotal point in this last 14-year cycle for me. I wrote and published 2 books. I started my own business. I came out of a comfort zone. I stopped being a complete and total wallflower. And now I'm very public about this gift and what I do. And I do readings for people. I do a podcast most of the time. I won't say every week because it's not anymore. But I've done a lot of things that I never would have done had all of these events not taken place. And so Stepping Stones to Destiny, the reason it's called that is this was a pivotal moment on my journey. It was one of the ways that I walked this path of what I'm here to do. And so, if you're curious, all of it's going to be linked in the description box of all of the videos. Click the link tree, and it's going to have a drop down box. Scroll all the way to the bottom, and the books are down there. So, Stepping Stones to Destiny was published in 2021. So I talk about my grief journey, I talk about my spiritual awakening, I talk about all the things that led up to this, to what I do today. And so there's a lot in there. And if you're curious about me as a person, or even if you're going through your own spiritual awakening, the reason why I had to survive all of these other crazy things was so I could share the knowledge, which is why we're here today. This is why I do what I do. So, it's always in hopes that some sort of information that I have lived through or gained knowledge that I can share those things with you. That's the goal of mastery, right? And so that's what we're here to do. All right. So 2020 onward. In 2021, I wrote my first book. Wrote it, published it. It is for sale on Amazon, all the goodies, okay? 2022, I'm actively doing readings, right? I've got a social media presence that's growing. I'm delving into tarot, which I'd read for over 20 years, doing readings for people, starting to branch out into the mediumship stuff, starting to be more confident with readings for people, and delving into the second book. So the second book is The Alabaster of New Orleans. This one is also for sale. It's in my LINKTREE. So your copy would look a little different. It's not going to have that little banner on there. This was my proof copy. So that one is a romance novel for shits and giggles because I fucking wanted to, because I could, right? Another part of my creativity, the dreamy Pisces energy, right? Pisces love. And so I thought, what better way than to write a romance book? There will be a sequel at some point. I'm not there yet. It'll get there eventually. Okay, so we've got the first and the second book. We're doing social media. We're doing all these things. Apologies, I have to cough. Okay, so that leads us into current time, right? The last few years, we've been working on this business. We've been working on this platform. We've been working with the collective. We've been honing our skills. We've been working on what? Mastery. Pisces is the 12th house of the zodiac. They're the masters, they're the gurus. They're the ones that have literally gone through every single house in the zodiac and taken little aspects of each sign and completed that full circle moment, that full cycle. So I was talking with a good friend of mine the other day, and he asked me, he said, something to the effect of, are you excited that we've finally completed our master's degree? And I had a good giggle of that. And it's like, holy shit, we really did, right? We really did complete a huge step. If you think of like when we're in school, right? It's like 15 years, right? From whatever, first grade all the way through high school. And then college, right? You think of doctors, right? They have to go to school for a very long time, right? A decade plus to be masters in their craft, right? So we really did get kind of a hard schooled lesson in mastering some of these things, right? These lessons, overcoming challenges, awakening our spirituality, awakening our true, authentic versions of ourselves, creating things, stepping out of comfort zones to be who we truly are supposed to be, stepping into our spiritual destiny, our karmic path that's designed for us when we incarnate. And as we head into Aries and Neptune, we're about to implement all of those lessons that we've learned. Are you fucking excited yet? Because I am. I'm extremely excited. So let's talk about what it means to be in mastery. What did we learn? All right, so to master something means to achieve complete proficiency, deep understanding, and effortless skill in a particular subject or activity through dedicated learning and extensive practice, reaching a point where you can perform it expertly, often instinctively, and sometimes even overcome challenges related to it, like mastering your emotions, right? And Pisces is the depth of the ocean when it comes to emotions. It's about going beyond just knowing how to do something to truly owning the skill, applying it creatively, and flowing with it seamlessly. Are you the master of your craft just yet? So let's talk about some key aspects of mastery. A deep understanding, grasping the core principles and nuances, not just surface level knowledge, right? Some of these lessons that I had to learn, and I'm going to speak from my own experience because I don't know what you went through on your side of things, but overcoming some of these challenges was some of the most challenging things I've ever had to live through. The most challenging time in my life has been the last 15 years. And so I am so grateful that by the time that Neptune comes back into Pisces in 165 years, this girl ain't going to be on this planet anymore, and I will never have to go through that hard of a lesson in my lifetime again, and I'm grateful for that. We've learned it, we're past it, we're not doing that shit ever again, right? So we're experiencing some high proficiency, being extremely skilled and able to perform the task effectively and consistently, right? You're a master at your craft, you can do it on cue. You know it forwards and backwards like the palm of your hand. All right, effortless application, the ability to use the skill naturally, often without conscious thought, as if it's part of you. Love that one. So I would say for the mediumship and the tarot side for me, that it is effortless application at this point, and that's how I know I've mastered my craft. There's no planning to do it. It's just you sit down and you know that it's there. It's like when you go to flip on a light switch. You know that as long as there's power running to that switch, you turn that on and it's just there, right? It just works. And so I feel like that's what spirit is kind of trying to point out to me with this, is that the gifts that we possess are already there. And now hopefully we've mastered some of this, and now it's time to apply what we've learned, right? All right, so overcoming challenges and gaining control over difficult aspects, such as mastering one's fears or complex techniques. That was a big one for me too. I would say that when I started doing mediumship readings for people, I wanted to be as accurate as possible. My spirit guide says, "You wanted to be accurate as fuck." Correct, I did. And that was a huge deal for me. I never wanted to give anybody false hope. I never wanted to sugarcoat things. I never wanted there to be any sort of like, oh, well, it's real generic. It's like, no, I needed it to be as accurate as possible. And so that was a huge deal for me. And so I pride myself on being accurate with my readings. And so I work really, really hard behind the scenes to make sure that the information that comes through is clear as it possibly can. And so part of that is that I had to overcome my fear. Fear is something that will hold you back from your destiny, I can promise you. And it was something that held me back for a long time. I had to have enough courage to be seen. I had to have enough courage to not care what people thought of the way that I look, the way that I talk, the way that I look when I channel, because I look like, I'm staring off into space, things like that. And so that was a lot of inner shadow work that I had to do over the last 15 years to get the fear under control and replace it with courage. And so by completing this really difficult leg of our journey, we're hopefully coming into that confidence instead of the fear. All right, so continuous growth. Even masters recognize that there's always more to learn, but they operate at an expert level while seeking deeper knowledge. And I would say that that is 100% where I'm at. I always feel like there's something else to learn, and I'm excited to always learn new things. However, at this leg in my journey, I always hope that I learn the lesson easy as opposed to difficult, right? We've mastered enough that we don't need to learn things by hitting our head against a brick wall. If you read my book, Stepping Stones to Destiny, I call it brick wall learning, where it's like sometimes we ignore the little nuances and the little whispers and tap on the shoulder from spirit. Then it gets a little louder. It's like, hey, you might want to do this. We ignore that. It gets louder, starts yelling at us. Hey, you need to pay attention. And if we still don't hear what spirit's trying to show us, well, we tend to hit a brick wall to learn the lesson, and that can be really difficult. So, as we age, hopefully, we learn things a little bit easier. We're going to start to try and work smarter, not harder, in this next leg of our journey. All right, so how to achieve mastery, because this is the point where we're at. Learn through reading, listening, watching, and doing, right? However, you learn best, but learn continuously. Keep learning, keep growing. Practice, consistent, focused, repetition, there we go, is crucial, right? I cannot tell you at this point, 6 years into it, how many readings I've done for people, paid or unpaid. I don't know. I've lost count. I've filled several spiral notebooks of mediumship readings. I've done countless thousands at this point readings of tarot readings, collective or personal. I don't know how many I've done at this point, but I've read for people quite literally all over the globe. I've read people in Australia, Bahrain, Asia, Canada, United States, um, Europe, like literally globally. I've read for people at this point. So I would say that distance isn't really an obstacle for my gift. And I feel like it's just a matter of when people need to find me, then they will. And then they're going to get whatever message that they need to hear at that time. And that's kind of what I've put into the ethers for spirit to line up the right connections at the right time. You will find me when you need a message. And I literally, I've had countless people find me online and tell me, I'm so glad I found you. I totally needed to hear that at that exact moment. It's not a coincidence, it's by design. I have literally manifested for you to find me when you need to hear a message specifically for you. It's not a coincidence. I don't believe in those. All right, so reflect, notice and adjust your approach as you improve. So notice and adjust your approach as you improve. Reflecting on things, right? That's what shadow work helps us do. I've done countless hours of shadow work on myself. I post shadow work for the collective over here on YouTube. We're going to do it weekly because we always have new people waking up, going through their own spiritual awakening. And I felt really lost in the beginning. I sought out so many different avenues to learn what in the heck was going on, right? What was all this shit that I was dealing with? And I feel like a lot of people need resources for that. So if I can be of help, be a resource with readings or, my books, things like that, that is what this was all for. And that is what God promised, is that all of it wouldn't be for nothing. That my purpose was bigger, that I had to go through all these things as an experience to help share the wisdom and knowledge with those that would need it in the future. And if you read the book, that's exactly what it says. Matter of fact, Spirit wants me to read that real quick. So 1 second. All right, so apologies as I read this because I don't remember it off the top of my head. All right, it starts. I can no longer ignore the signs that I am being shown, and we're going to get into some of those signs here shortly. Hindsight is 2020. It couldn't be more true. What if the year that we thought was the worst year of our lives instead forged us into the people that we must become to save the world? Is that too bold, you might ask? Maybe, but what if it was destined? It started like most New Year's Eve. Watch the ball drop, stay up late, and make resolutions that no one ever keeps. What it would turn into for me would be the miracle that I didn't know to ask for. Some of us would emerge a completely changed person, one a little tarnished, but forged with holy fire to purify the soul. A phoenix rising from the ashes to emerge a new creation. I've heard life called many things. For me, 2020 meant life was short in a really hard place. Losing my mom was a catalyst for healing. I didn't know that I needed it. To finally step into the place that God wanted me to go. Mighty big shoes to fill. A job with few perks, but the real reward was living your real life. A worldwide pandemic, an on again, off again lockdown, having to dig deep into fixing who you are as a person, and of course, life's twists and turns along the way on the journey known of life. I believe that 2020 was a year full of things that we never saw coming. From loss and tragedy to lessons and growing spiritually, the changes had to happen. It might take us many years from now to fully see why we needed to be put into this place spiritually speaking. Where would you be had it not happened? Same dead end job, same house, same dead end relationship? What did you do differently in quarantine that you wouldn't have been able to do? World pandemic aside, what would it have taken in your own life to push you forward? Would you have made any changes in your life? Or would you still be doing the same status quo? I don't think I'm unique. I consider myself pretty normal. I am a stay at home mom and I'm thankful to be able to do so. However, I didn't always feel like it was where I should be in life. There have been many times I didn't know what my goals were or where I felt I needed to be in life. How do you measure success? For me, it never had to do with money or fame at all. I don't enjoy being in the spotlight much, if at all, and I still don't. I still don't like being the center of attention. I'm a very shy person, and until I come out of my shell, I don't engage with many people. I've always been more of an introvert. I like to observe people and see if I like them or if I fit in. Most of the time, I don't. My ideas are usually very off the wall. My thoughts are out of the box. I find very few people relate to me and my experiences. That used to bother me. Now I understand I was never meant to blend in, but to stand out. As I look back on my last few decades of life, I now see it was so many preparations and lessons that I had to go through to be who I was meant to grow into in my life. The hardest battles God will use to bless not only you, but others. What others view as shame, God will use to be your testimony. I carried shame in my soul for so many years for so many things. I didn't even realize how much until I started to try to heal what broke me. Some think healers or spiritual people are all perfect or have never really been through anything terrible. In my case, this is not true. I've been through things that would make most people cringe. I've lost count at the number of tears that I've cried or things I've prayed for that I didn't see happen. Somehow we still have to get up and carry on with living. But there are days when I don't know which way is up. So how do you keep going? My faith in God has sometimes been all I had. Some days seem dark and heavy. I don't always know how it's going to turn out or if it will be okay. I don't need to. That's God's job. I like most moms who have had a lot on my plate in life. Throw in your average family issues, money worries, kids, significant others, in laws, work, whatever, and throw into the mix a total lockdown, followed by turning 40. Turning out you have a chronic illness that has no cure, a major death in your family, and a psychic gift that at times felt more like a curse, and you have my life in a nutshell. I don't think I'm the only one who went through major changes in 2020. We were supposed to. I believe it was all part of how God works in our life. Family might have been on the back burner. Work might have been a focus or surviving or striving for success. When you have a true awakening in life, it's not pleasant. It's usually quite painful. When I go to someone for advice, I'm generally going to someone who I think can either relate or has also gone through something similar. Most of us wouldn't go to a child for life advice. They simply would not have experience enough to do so. I, for one, do not have all of life's answers. I promise you I don't. But I have lived a few years and I've learned a few very hard lessons. I believe we learn the whole time that we live here on earth. All of us are here to learn. No one leaves this place the same as we came in. This is my story about how I can communicate with the living and the dead and how I developed the gift that God gave me. Just a normal woman who happens to connect two worlds in hopes that it helps others find some healing in their own life. a way to pay it forward. I couldn't have made it I couldn't have made it on my own in life without so many people's help along the journey of life. Above all else, the credit is always God's. I'm simply a messenger, but the information is always from my Creator. God gives us validation. The devil will give us confusion, and whether or not you're a Christian is not the point. I only hope to open your eyes to the possibilities we as souls live on after our life on earth. There is an afterlife, spirit is very real, and love is very real. All right, so last part of mastery is deep work. Focus without interruptions on the skill. Where's your focus? Where has it been the last 14, 15 years of your life? What has all of this taught you? What did you learn? Are you ready to master those lessons and move forward and apply those in your daily life? Because the next 14, 15 years is how we demonstrate what we learned. What did we master? In essence, mastery is the state of becoming an expert or a master of a skill or a subject, allowing you to command it fully. Welcome to Aries and Neptune. Have a great week. So there was one more part that I wanted to add to all of the crazy stuff that happened in the last few days. So I was chatting with a friend of mine the other night, and he was asking, we both read each other, and so I have a few friends that kind of do what I do. And so he said, hey, if you have a minute, could you pull a couple cards for me? I have some questions I'd like some answers to. Sure, let's trade services, blah blah blah. So I read for him, he read for me, and we do that periodically. I have another friend that we kind of do that as well. So anyway, long story short on that, there was someone that he was asking me about, and so I pulled cards, but I also channeled information. And so in the conversation, I was telling him that it looks like there's something that's hidden that might come to light about this person, and that what I could see was a woman that was like shouting and pointing her finger at somebody, but I was unsure of what the issue was. And then I was seeing the letter C, and I was also seeing what looked like a raccoon in my mind. And I thought, why in the world is Spirit showing me a raccoon? So that's the important part of this one. So I told him, hold on a second, let me look up what the spiritual meaning of a raccoon is in your world. And so I'm giving him the definition. So it says, when a raccoon appears, it's a sign to explore hidden parts of yourself. Okay. And this is important as we're transitioning into Neptune in Aries. A call to use your cleverness and problem solving skills, a nudge to question appearances and masks, right? Because raccoons wear a mask on their eyes, right? A reminder to find value in what seems undesirable, right? Because we call them trash pandas, okay? Because they're always in trash cans looking for food and things. A prompt to establish or enforce personal boundaries. So there's more to it. A raccoon's spiritual meaning centers on cleverness, curiosity, transformation, and boundary setting. Really big going forward. We're going to need boundaries. We're going to need to establish certain things so that we can transform. They often appear as a trickster or a guide to the hidden aspects of ourselves, urging us to use our resourcefulness to navigate the shadows and find opportunities even in unexpected places, like sifting through trash for value. They symbolize adapting to change, integrating our primal instincts with our conscious mind, and using our dexterity and cunning to solve problems, reminding us to question mass and reveal our true selves. So I would say that's definitely something that we're going to start to see moving forward. Key spiritual meanings, masks and disguise. The black mask signifies mystery. The black mask signifies mystery, hidden identities, transformation, and the need to question illusions or reveal your authentic self, right? We're coming out of the Pisces illusionary, dreamy energy. We're removing the mask. Are we seeing some coincidences here? Spirit loves to give me pointers. Curiosity and ingenuity. Raccoons are known for exploring and problem solving, teaching us to be curious, resourceful, and find solutions in challenging situations. Hello, the fucking world is in kind of a clusterfuck right now. So we're trying to find creative solutions to figure things out as a collective. Adaptability and boundaries. They represent navigating the edge between wild and civilized, showing us how to adapt, set boundaries, and use existing resources effectively. Okay, so that's really important. The shadow self and integrity. They embody the shadow self. Raccoons embody the shadow self. If you happen to see a raccoon, tell me this wasn't for you. Encouraging integration of hidden parts of you and teaching about conscious and integrity by examining motives for stealing energy, time, etc. Trickster and opportunity. In some indigenous traditions, the tricksters, as they are known, also symbolize finding opportunities in unexpected places like a dumpster, offering hope for finding value in overlooked situations. That's a big one too, right? Have you ever heard that saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure? Have you ever gone dumpster diving hoping to find something of value? Well, these trash pandas, little raccoons, do it all the time, right? They're known to be in dumpsters and things like that looking for food, looking for things of value. So I feel like we're about to kind of uncover a diamond in a rough over the next 15 years. Like, really uncovering things that maybe other people would have thrown away. Shit, maybe it's parts of you that are hidden that you like buried and threw away because you didn't understand them or you weren't ready to use them. So it could be a lot of different things that we're starting to wake up. What else? When a raccoon appears, it's a sign to explore hidden parts of yourself. All right. So we're going to use cleverness for problem solving skills, a nudge to question appearances and masks, right? In your life, in your world, the people around you, a reminder to find value in what seems undesirable or trash, and a prompt to establish or enforce personal boundaries. So that is the area we're headed to. So kid you not. I tell you all of this for a reason. I have receipts, okay? So we have this conversation just the other night, and we're chatting for a little while about all things under the sun, just yada, 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 yapping, yapping. That's what we do. And so all of a sudden, I get a photo sent to me from him, and I open the photo, and I'm going to show you said photo because it ties into all of this, right? Spirit will give you fucking signs, crystal clear, to let you know that you either need to change course or that you are on the right path. And so this whole evolution into mastery is showing us the things that are hidden so that we can expose them and so we can delve deep into creating solutions that are actually going to be beneficial. See if I can get this in here. See the little raccoon? This was on his back porch. Within an hour of me telling him that I saw a raccoon in my mind, that I didn't understand why I was seeing a raccoon, and I gave you the explanation of what the raccoon means spiritually, there was a raccoon. Welcome to Mastery. We are here. We are ready. We are ready to move forward. It's time to turn the fantasy into reality. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you next time. I forgot. Spirit told me I had to include my reply to this so you guys could see it. So he sends me the picture, and my reply is that a fucking raccoon? Because I channeled that, right? I knew that there was a raccoon there, but I didn't know why. I said, is that a fucking raccoon? And could the sign be any clearer? And his reply was no. So, could the sign be any clearer, right? The masks are falling off. We're going to get there. We're mastering these lessons. We're innovating. We're starting to make things take action so we can go forward. Thanks for sticking with me. If you made it all the way to the end of this, drop a purple heart in the comments or a raccoon, and we're going to know that you made it to the end. We'll see you guys next time. Have a great week.